is Chris again.
Hello, it's me again.
See, I didn't say the usual introduction.
I know you threw me off a little.
So Chris, what do you do as a living or as a part-time living? What do you do?
See, that's a tough one. See, I was thinking about this. It's like, so is it somebody who makes comic books? Are you a comic book artist? Are you a cartoonist? What
Are
what
you an
is the definition?
illustrator? What are you? What are you?
I mean, I do animation as well, so that's a little easier. That's an animator, but technically you're drawing. So if you're animating cartoons, are you still a cartoonist?
So let's go through the terminology through, you know, various books, YouTube videos and stuff. So comic book artists. Now there's a
Yeah.
range of comic book artists. Now you can't just say I'm a comic book artist because there's categories in comic book artists. Penciler, letter, inker, writer.
That's, that's very true. And like cover artists, because cover artists are always a little
Cover
different
artists
than,
also. Yes, that's it.
so it's like, yeah, like, you look at those old Sandman covers, which were like photographed, like,
Dave
uh,
McKean covers, yes.
yeah. So is he a comic book artist?
So let's go through, we'll answer that as we go along. So let's go
Yeah.
through the stages. So
Okay.
in comic books, you first have a writer.
Hmm.
Now, that's obvious what he or she does in a comic book, but there are different types of writing also in comics, like the
Yeah.
Marvel style, DC style. So that's another category of we could get into also.
Sure. So why don't we talk about, I mean, there's the two main styles. I mean, I think we've established in this podcast in the past that writing styles, you can do just about anything, but sort of there are two sort of known styles. One is sort of Marvel and one is DC. Although
Yes,
DC is a little bit more vague, you
I
know.
think I think I think everyone takes those two styles and they interpret their versions of it. Now, do you want
Mhm.
to describe a Marvel plot style?
So Marvel plot style, from what I understand, is basically the writer starts off with just a concept. So it'll be like, I think, the classic has been Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Stan Lee would say, "Oh, I think the Fantastic Four should fight a giant mole man or
And a lot of
something."
times it's not even written down. A lot of time it's verbal communications in the office, or for example, like Tom Yo and myself have done that, where we talk and say, "Hey, in this issue, why don't we have, yeah, Mole Man attacking Sue Richards, and the Thing comes in and saves the day."
Yep.
So that's it. And the artist goes and starts planning out the pages without any written information. And if you do get a script, I mean, if you do get a Marvel plot, I mean, it's laid out page by page, but it describes, like Chris said, bare minimum of what's going on. I mean, it explains that the dialogue is placed later after the artwork has been completed.
Yeah, I never understand that because one of the complicated things about Marvel style is like, how do you leave space in it for dialogue?
I think that's sort of challenging thing for the writer would be because when you write stories, you have certain things in mind and you want certain characters to say something. But what if the artist has overcomplicated those panels and you're thinking, I can't put that dialogue in there now?
Exactly. And can you imagine how many like amazing like panels have been just covered with a dialogue balloon because the writer needs to put words in there? So it's crazy.
Well, that's what I remember. Now, if it's not, people could correct me on this, but that famous G.I. Joe issue of Snake Eyes, if I remember, they did the whole story and said, you know what, this doesn't need dialogue.
Yeah, that to me as a writer, that was like, I'm not feeling it
It could be, but then there's some stories you do. One thing I do remember as a young kid, researching all of this, I remember almost every artist and writer had stated that, when you draw your story, look at it. If you could tell what's going on without putting dialogue, then you've done your job.
Yeah, I tend to try and do that. The other reason I tend to avoid dialogue as much as possible or minimally in my stuff is because I like the idea of people from other places that maybe English isn't their first language reading my stuff.
That's
And
it.
even if they
Yes.
get the English version, they can kind of follow along anyway. And if I ever decided to get a book translated, which I've never done yet, but if I ever did, it would cost me a lot less because I would have a lot less to
Yes.
translate.
Now,
So
for DC style, I think everyone knows it's more of a traditional script style, kind of close to what a movie script would be. But,
yeah,
you know, in a way, it describes every panel in detail and has the dialogue written in it. So the artist has creativity, but it's also limited because the writer is thinking on certain ways to draw, visualize the panels.
yeah. I tend to go closer to DC style when I because I write scripts for myself, and I tend to go closer to DC style than Marvel.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, only because
Okay, so
I'm
now
only because I'm worried I'll have an idea and I'll forget how I'm going to like I'll sort of it's more of a memory thing than anything else. But even when I write scripts for other people, I tend to give it more DC style, but I don't tend to like I think it's sort of like here's my style, but if you want to change this, that's okay.
okay, so now the next person up on the comic book creation is the penciler. What does a
Yeah,
penciler
the
do?
pencil. So I mean, a penciler is basically it's funny because pencilers can be very there's sometimes two pencilers I've heard because sometimes there's the person who does like layout like really rough stuff.
Yes, you're right. Yes, yes.
And then somebody will come in and put more details. And then occasionally that's this most of the time it's the same person. But
Most of the time, yes.
I've heard some stories of some, high-powered comic book artists that are sort of like, I'm being paid just to put my name on it and sort of do rough layouts, and then they hand it off to a
Now
junior
I
guy.
heard that story about John Byrne.
Yeah. I I actually think it probably happens a lot more than you think, in that I feel like even the big artists of today probably a lot of the time have like a studio and they might have a couple of assistant artists
Well,
that
that's
sort
the
of
thing.
go
It's
in.
like going with the Japanese thinking, and even North American in the '60s and '70s. A lot of these artists had studio assistants, and
Yeah,
honestly, you don't even know what the studio assistant did in the. Did they do backgrounds? Did they do layouts? What did they do? You don't know because one example is Neil Adams. His name's on it, but he has a studio full of people. You don't know who did what.
yeah. The other artist that's actually well known for that is Jim Davis, the Garfield cartoonist.
I've heard about that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So if you ever look at like the early books of Garfield, they look nothing like the new stuff, like nothing, not even close. So I would imagine, and there's a lot of actually there's been a lot of there's even been comic books and TV shows based on sort of working on a cartoon strip in a large sort of office studio with many people working on them, and many people have said that's inspired off of Garfield.
But that
So
happens. That's happened in North American comics, Japanese comics, and that's there. So next level. No, sorry. So now, what does a penciler do?
I mean, a penciler basically puts in all of the art, decides the angles, decides where the characters will stand. Some pencilers get very detailed, and it's almost like they're producing something that almost could be reproduced on their
Yes.
own. Some go a lot looser. In today's world, you don't have, if you want, you can stop at pencils. If you are a detailed penciler, and you can photograph it and scan it nowadays and actually produce a comic book based on your pencils. But basically, I mean, they do almost as the name is, they work in pencil, and it's not sort of a finished solid piece. It's more of loose, kind of sketchy. Again, depends on the artist, but that's most of the time how it goes.
So the next person up is the inker. What does an inker do
Yeah. I mean, the
besides
inker,
tracing the pencil?
it's funny because there's the classic, the inker is just a tracer. But I
Yeah.
think that like for me, I actually keep my pencils really loose because I like to finish in my ink. And some artists are like that too, where they have a relationship with their inker so much
Yes.
so that they really don't finish their work and they want the inker to sort of add to it or a little bit like that as
When
well.
you,
So
I know on personal level, when I've inked other people's work, Tom Yo, Derek Barton, and other people, I've noticed, you know, when they say ink or just traces, that's, that's crap. You know,
yeah,
it's because when you start going over other person's pencils, you start adding your own details to it. You
Yeah.
subtract certain things, you add things, you add your own unique style, and it works. I mean, I've looked at some of the pages that I paint for other people. I'm looking, I go, I could see my work, but it's their work.
The other thing that happens with inking, and I don't know if this happens, I haven't inked that many people's work because I'm not a great inker. Um, but one of the things I find about inking is it's also time to correct something. So every once in a while there'll be like little mistakes, little things like, and it's either something that the artist didn't notice or something that wasn't clear. But I tend to find that I use inking as also a time to sort of improve the art. So if a hand
Yes.
looks a little wonky, if a character is a little too tall, if that sort of thing, this is the time when you can sort of go over everything again and make some changes.
Now, on the good side and bad side, there's some inkers that will, you know, make the artist's work 100 times better. And on the
Mhm.
other hand, there's some artists that makes the other work, you know, worse. Like, I mean, I'll give you an example. Crisis on Infinite Earths. I think Mike DiCarlo inked George Perez in the first few issues. It was so inking. Mike DiCarlo is not a bad inker. Then Jerry Ordway came on. Wow, amazing inking job. Then,
Mhm.
you look at the historical stories of, Jack Kirby's inks, then Vince Coletta inking it. And, a lot of people used to joke he used to have an inking eraser,
Yeah.
where when he didn't want to ink certain things, he'd erase it. So, you know, some artists will, like you look at some work and they'll like just look, you know, do amazing job with the penciler's work.
Yeah. I tend to find that it's not necessarily a bad inker or a bad penciler, but it's a bad chemistry between the two.
Could be, yes. But then you have to remember also, I mean, especially in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, you know, I don't mean to say this in the wrong way. They didn't care about the art. It was more a production line.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the amount of time you have. And the thing about the later you get in this process, if you're working on a real project as opposed to like, like something that has a deadline, um, so the artist will take their time and suddenly the inker has less time. Like
That's
the
it.
further you
That's
get
it.
down, like
Yep. Yeah.
the further you get down, the more, if there is a time crunch, the
Yes.
more it'll affect you.
So mentioning that, the next person in line, or actually, no, before the inker, it would be the letterer. Sorry, I skipped that because the
Although
letterer
sometimes
would.
don't they do lettering after inking and just use like a like either paste
So
ups and
we're
stuff like
we're
that?
talking we're talking more old school style. So it would be paste up, or yes, they would paste up over the inking, or sometimes the pages go, or most of the times the pages would go to a letterer. The
Hmm.
letterer would letter it, and then send it off to the inker to ink it.
So here's a question. In the old days, did the inker ink the lettering as well, or did the letterer ink their own lettering?
No, I think the lettering, their own lettering, because a lot of times when I've seen the pages, you'll see the lettering and the word balloon the letterer has put in. So they
Okay.
do all the balloons and everything.
Okay. Which, to be honest, one thing for anybody starting their own independent comic book, if you want to think about the most overlooked thing in making a comic book, it's figuring out how your balloons have to work.
Oh, that's a that's a good thing to mention because the balloons. Trust me, you'll spend so many times. You're lettering the book. You use ellipse templates. You use everything to make that balloon, and you try freehand. Some of my old comics, you look at and go, "What the hell were you thinking on the word balloons?" you
Exactly.
know, and
It
even the
takes a long
stupid
time to
part,
figure it out.
e- even the tail, even the
Oh, not
tail,
even the
it's
tail. The tail is a pain.
yeah,
Is it skinny?
yeah,
Is it fat?
yeah.
Is it curved?
You spend
Yeah.
it's you know what? Kudos to all the letters out there because they do an amazing job. I mean, it's hard, and it's a very unique, talented skill.
Yeah. I think it's gotten easier in the digital age because I imagine you're not sitting there measuring stuff out. You kind of put a font in
It is
and
much easier for
yeah.
someone who's not good at it. I'm loving my programs where I could just click and drag and put the balloon in and put the tail in. But even on that, simple as it sounds, you still have to think on the size. You have to
Yes.
think on the balloon. You have to think the position of the tail. You can't just pop it in there and say it's going to work. You have to think it out.
Yeah. And you have to stay consistent. That's the one thing that I find,
That's it. Yes.
the styles of balloons you're using has to be really consistent or else it's very jarring if it isn't.
Well, over the years, again, been doing this for a long time. So I have my settings, preset settings now. The thickness of the balloons, thickness of the tail, um, you know, the font size and how much space I put in between the words and the balloon and all that stuff. It's all preset.
Yeah, but it takes years to figure that out.
It does. It does. And if you look at my first computer digital lettering, it's terrible.
Yeah,
Okay, so
I can
next one
imagine.
in line is the colorist.
Colors,
Now,
if needed.
if needed, yes. If you're doing a
Yeah.
colored book, now a lot of us who are doing self-publishing, there's no such thing as a colorist. That's us. But let's talk about mainstream comic book terminology. Colorist. What does a colorist he or she does?
You see, it's funny because you can look at a colorist two ways. A colorist either is literally just putting some splashes of color and simple, easy, particularly in older style when you're dealing with like a four color press where you had limited, how much blending and stuff you could
Yes.
do. But then the sort of modern thing, like if you look at Image is sort of a good example, but a bad example at the same time, where the colorist is doing a lot of the heavy lifting of making characters like the shape of something come out because they're using
Yes.
tones and everything like that. Again, good or bad, depending on your feeling of the art. But it's sort of, it's basically the person that puts in the color, but you can also, a lot of times you're also putting in the tones because in black and white, you might consider the colorist to be the time when you're putting the tones in too. That could sort of be considered
Now,
the same time.
now one thing I still baffles me and is how the four color process worked for colors because you see the pages and you see the color codes on the side with the arrows pointing and all that stuff, and I still baffles me to this day. How does the separator separate all of this?
I know it's got to be crazy. It's so confusing, and how do you scan
It
it?
is, yeah. Well, not
Particularly
even
back in the day.
scanning. Not that's what I mean. In the back of the day, you got, let's say, let's go with photocopies because they called it photostats at that time. So they're photocopying it to whatever printed size. Colors comes in with their dyes and whatever colors the pages. They're looking at their color guides, and the color guides have all those codes, and they're writing all the codes on the pages. So I'm thinking, how to this day, I'm still baffled by that.
It's either, it must take forever. And also, like, again, as we said before, like you're at one of the last people to get it. So if anybody's time is getting crunched, you're the person that's like, you got to do this
Well,
comic book. You've got a day.
I remember hearing stories about DC and Marvel. They used to get their, you know, people in the offices to color the pages because that's how behind they were in certain pages and stuff. And that's how when you look at some of the old comics, you could tell which books had good coloring and which had bad coloring.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes you see color differences between like you'll read the first four pages and the next four pages the colors will be slightly different.
And
So
one of the earliest books I remember like color changing were like I think Epic Comics had a lot of, this is like the pre-Vertigo books, and Epic Comics was Marvel's alternative press books and stuff, and they actually thought about using color and stuff, and they had painterly colors and things like that in their books.
yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Well, they had photography even like, some of their books
Yeah.
went was crazy with stuff. So I can't imagine.
So so on the what we've mentioned, all the creative process people in the creative process, have I left out anyone?
Yes, you have.
Who?
Editor.
Yes, but would you? Well, I'm gonna get I'm gonna be in trouble for this. Would you call them creative? No, yeah, yeah, no, you would because
I
they're
think it depends
no,
on
you're
the
right.
editor,
No,
but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, you would because they have to look at it. They have to look at the penciling, letter, or writing, penciling, inking, lettering, making sure everything's right. Like we said, common things like if a word balloon's off, he or she might come in and say, hey, correct this. This doesn't look good.
And often the editor is also the one that sort of does the overarching story too.
Yes.
And so they may not look at the detail of the story, but they'll be like, they're the ones that'll be like, okay, well, the Fantastic Four
But
at the end of the year have to get to
y
this point.
no, but you also brought up a point, and this is where I know Marvel had a big one, production department, where, if there's let's say, like you said, if an arm is off or a leg is off or something, some production guy in the back, in the back office will come in and do paste up or white out, correct correct what the editor wants.
Yeah, yeah, and that's sort of working. I mean, I know some editors at Marvel and DC were artists in their own. I'm sure they probably just sat and
Yes,
went, I'll just do it myself.
that's it. And oh, one more person we forgot, cover artists.
Yeah, cover artist is an interesting one too.
A lot of times with DC, Marvel, and some of the alternate companies, and this is going back to, Golden Age to now, they always had a different cover artist than the interior artist because, when it's on the newsstand, that cover better be popping so that person looks and says, I want to buy this.
Yeah, there are some people who are better at covers than other people, for sure. There's some people that just have like a way of doing an image that's like it's a different skill set to some degree because you have to also sort of
That
tell the story of the comic book in one image.
that's why if you look at all the TikTok Tom books, I've never done a cover. That's why I'm not a cover artist.
There you go. It's funny though. I'm actually reading old Flash comics right now, like the old. I guess it was the Return of the Flash, so like the Silver Age, and
So is this the Barry Brown Boland covers?
I think
Or is
so.
it the 60s stuff you're talking about, 60s, 70s?
Yeah, 60s and 70s. Yeah,
Trying to remember, Neil Adams did a lot of covers at that time.
I think so. I don't know if he did anything. The thing about the covers for that are, if you think about it, they do so much to try and tell the story. So sometimes it's almost a ridiculous cover where it'll be like sliced up and
Yeah,
everything like
it
that.
is, yes.
So
Now,
it's
one
almost like
cover, I'm trying to remember Neil Adams and who else? I know Carmen Infantino did some covers, but I think later, I can't remember who else did the covers. I remember a lot of Neil Adams covers.
yeah, I don't remember. But the collection I'm reading is in a graphic novel, and so not all the covers are available, or at least if they
Okay.
are, they're just small versions of it. But it's it's interesting though how you look at the Silver Age and everything, and they really prioritized telling what was going to happen in the book more than popping beautiful image. And I think it wasn't until the 80s and 90s that it became more about sort of like you can sort of tell the story. You don't have to tell everything, but it's more about making a cool, heavy, interesting
Yes.
image. And so
And you have
that
to
really
remember,
changed.
in the old days, you had the newsstand, you had the comic shop that had the full display of all the covers. Now you have overlapping covers on comic stands where you
Yeah,
barely could see the cover. So,
yeah.
question for you, cover artist wise, what's one cover artist that you comes to your mind when you think of cover artists?
I mean, I like Sam Keith's stuff. He did a lot from Marvel when he started when he was drawing the books, but his covers are always amazing. They're like paintings. I like
Yes,
anybody who
yes.
uses paintings. Bill Sienkiewicz, I think, did a few covers for a while.
Lots of them, lots of them. Yeah.
Yeah, his stuff was really it was out there. You know what I mean? It was sort of like it wasn't. I kind of like when I prefer going more the artsy style, popping it out. You don't have to tell me the story. I can pick it up and flip through it as long as it's not polybagged. As long as I can pick it up and go through it, you know, that's all the cover artist has to do is get me to pick it up in the store. They don't have to get me to buy it.
That's one book, and I've had this talk with a friend of mine years ago. One book that I bought, and the stories were so-so, art was so-so, but I bought them because of the covers. New Defenders.
Hmm.
If you look at the New Defenders, Kevin Nolan did the covers, and the covers blew me away. And I was just like, I bought it for the cover, not the inside.
Yeah, yeah. Darwin Cook for a while did some interesting cover work too, because he would go really graphic
Yes,
design on his covers, and then his interiors would be more sort of classic cartoony, but then his covers were just really sort of designy, and that was kind of cool. I like that.
Now, one of the best cover artists I have to say of all time for me is, and his covers just blew everything away, Mike Zeck.
Yeah,
He did a lot of amazing covers for Captain America, and the main ones I remember are like GI Joe covers he did.
yeah,
They were like amazing. It's like, as soon as you saw it, you were like, I want to pick up this book.
yeah. It's true. It's true. The other cover artist that I always liked was Simon Beasley,
Yes, he was good. He was good
but his were
because he had
literally
that.
like paintings.
That's what I was going to say. His style was unique that, it's like Sienkiewicz where, across the room you could see it because it's like, wow, what's this?
And almost every Simon Beasley cover I can think of has probably been sold as a poster at some point.
Well, probably, probably.
Yeah, yeah. I hear
So
that he
we
still
cover,
makes money reproducing his covers. So he'll actually
does he?
yeah, so like you can pick one of his past covers and he'll repaint it for you.
Actually, you're right, because I did see a posting on Instagram. He was at a convention, and beside him, I'm not sure if his wife or assistant or what, she had a poster of the Lobo #1 cover.
Classic one, yeah.
Yeah. So we covered all the things on comic book. What do you call it? Creative process. People involved in the creative processes. So now, people like us, you take all of those, penciler, editor, inker, letter, combine it all in one, and you have us.
Yeah. I
We
mean,
do
cartoonist
everything.
is sort of the way to is sort of the
So
general way.
so now that brings up that question. What is a cartoonist? Because that's
Yeah.
not a is that's not a comic book artist, right?
I think it is. I think a cartoonist is a comic book artist, but is also a comic strip artist and is also an animator. It's sort of a overarching thing.
See, for me, you know, for me, that terminology cartoonist thinks of Garfield, Bill Watterson, or you know, Far Side or something like that. That's cartoonist.
Yeah, but if you think about it, like, so the guy who was doing the comic strips for Spider-Man in the paper, was he a cartoonist or was he a comic book artist? Because he's not
John
doing
Romita,
comic books.
but then again, John Romita and some of the, Russ Manning, Wally Wood, and all those guys did comic strips.
So they're not, that's not a comic book artist because that's not a comic book. That's a cartoon strip.
I know that's it. That's where you know, you know, that's where you draw the line and say, is this or that?
And the reason why I say that it's okay to put us as being cartoonists when we're doing comic books is because if you think about it, comic books were collections of cartoon strips when they started.
Yes,
So the
but then again,
origins of comic book artist is a cartoonist.
yes, yes. Good point. Good point.
So that's why I put it under that same thing. Like I know cartoons, when you say cartoons, you think Scooby-Doo and you know, and even like Far Side and Mother Goose and Grimm.
No, no, no.
But
I don't mean it that way. I think for in a comic book, when you think a cartoonist, they're doing the long panels, 4 panels maybe. Or when you think
yeah.
a comic book artist, they're doing full page, 24-page books.
So what you're saying is that Seth is a cartoonist and not a comic book artist.
Good point. Good point. Because this now, but then we're looking at, are we looking at style of art or are we looking at way the person does the comic?
But on the other hand, then if we look at style of art, there's been some like really cartoony comic book stuff that exists out there. Like
Then
even Bruce
again,
Timm is sort of cartoony.
yeah. And the main one, that our hero, Sergio Aragonis, is he a cartoonist or is he a comic artist?
See, I believe he's both.
But on the other hand, you said that's same thing.
Well, it is the same thing. I think all comic book artists are cartoonists, but not
But
all
then again,
cartoonists are comic book
but
artists.
then again, it's like that thing where, I get into talks with people. Oh, you could do graphic novels? No, I do comics.
But you do graphic novels because when you collect your
You
comic
do,
books,
but you know, the non-comic people see it as graphic novels. They don't see it as comics.
that's why if I'm talking to somebody who's like unfamiliar, I'll say I'm a comic book artist, which isn't a lie.
Yeah.
But then I will, if you were to like sort of, if they say, oh, well, you're a cartoonist, I'd say, well, yeah, in a way, I would say yes.
But here's the thing. Okay, let's say you whatever situation you're at, and you introduce yourself and say, "Hey, I'm a cartoonist." The first reaction is, "Oh, you do Garfield, you do, Far Side type of cartoons."
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't think I would ever introduce myself as a cartoonist necessarily. I think I would say comic book, I mean, because I do animation too. And
Yes.
that also, I think, puts me in cartoonist realm for a good part, except for when you deal with like special effects and stuff like that, then it's a different thing. But when you're sort of telling a story, I mean, we need Scott McCloud here to really define this.
I
But
I've I haven't been, years ago, when I was starting off, I was embarrassed to say I draw comics and stuff. Now I just come out and say it, hey, I do comic books.
yeah,
And I'm not afraid to hide it. I don't care, It's like, you know what? If you think lesser of me, that's, whatever. But it's, we've always as comic book artists, we've always had, you know, cartoonist or comic book artists, even the art community did not highly look up on us.
yeah.
That terminology, it's had bad, attachments to it.
The other thing about calling yourself a comic book artist, I find, because both you and I do our comic, like we do everything. As we in that entire list that we just went through, we do everything. So some people would have a hard time saying, well, I also write the stories too.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll say I'm a comic book creator.
So let me ask you this for you. Okay, now moving on that subject, as a self what do you call it, independent artist, you're doing everything: writing, penciling, inking, lettering, production, printing. You're doing everything. Is there at certain point where you go, I don't like doing certain things of this process?
I think maybe there could be, um, and that wouldn't be bad, but I've yet to really hate any part of it, except for that first time that you go to Amazon and it drives you bananas. Then you think, I never want to do this again.
Watch
Um,
our video on that on Amazon, and you'll see our frustration.
So I think you can get I think you can want to leave it. The problem is it's a bit of a downward spiral because you sometimes start to leave things. So well, I don't really like this, and I don't really like this, and eventually you're not actually doing your comic book anymore. Todd McFarlane's sort of a good example of that. He doesn't really draw Spawn anymore. I don't know how much he's involved with the story. I'm sure he is a bit, but I don't think he's that involved with it anymore. So I can imagine that he pulled himself away so much to the point where I just think he basically maybe does overarching story, but that's about it.
That's it. Yeah.
And I mean that's okay. I mean you get older, it's up to you. Whereas like we've heard Eric Larson pretty much does exactly the same amount of work he did from the beginning.
Yes. Now,
So
on certain things, it's like, I've read somewhere some artists and writers where, they'll do pencil a 24-page story, put it, give it, send it off to, whatever company. That's the last what they see of it. A lot of
mm,
times they don't even look at the printed final version.
yeah, yeah,
To them, it's
yeah.
like I've done my pencils and that's it.
I've worked on projects for other people that I've enjoyed working on in various different mediums. And then when it's done, I don't care about it anymore at all.
You do, because even certain things like books I work on, um, I'm one of those people. I don't do heavy writing, scripting when I'm doing my own stories, and I do it. I write. I'll do rough write ups and I'll do thumbnails, pencils or loose pencils. Then I'll ink most of it because I'm at the point where if I do full detailed scripts of my stories, full pencils, by the time I get to ink it, I'm so bored of that story.
Yeah, yeah. I don't tend to do. I'll do full scripts. I don't tend to do. I do thumbnails too. I do full scripts. I do thumbnails. My pencils though are very loose, and that's more like my inking style because I want my inking to be my final drawing. And I find that if I pencil too much, my inks get really stiff. So I tend
I,
to
w-
keep my pencils loose so I can tighten it up with my inking, and it
I
just
was
makes
looking
it
at
loose.
a artist on Instagram, and he was posting his next project, and he was posting some of the scripts. I could see the copy of the script and stuff, and I'm going, "Wow, that's so much detail." You know, you know, for me at that point. But then again, you know what? Comparing his work to my book, you know, I'm in awe of his work. So
Yeah,
but on the other hand, I can't do that. It's like even penciling. I've tried doing type pencils, and for me, it's just, you know, it's again, it's one of those things where I think the there's a good side to it and bad side. I'll explain the bad side to it first. The bad side of doing your own work is you going through all those creative processes, you'll get so bored. I mean, some stories you'll be so excited doing everything start to end. Other times you're going, okay, I need to finish this. But on the good side, if you're just doing pencils, let's say pencils as a penciler, you're just in pencils, you could spend whole day penciling that page because you
yeah,
don't have to touch that page again afterwards.
yeah, yeah,
But when you're doing your own work, you have to do everything on that page.
yeah, yeah. I tend to, I mean, my scripts for Blue Orchid are 3 to 4 pages of written word,
That's it. Yeah.
and so fairly detailed. I mean, the stories aren't complicated as it is,
But if
but
but if you were writing a story for someone else where you had no involvement in anything else except for writing, you'd probably put more effort into writing it, right?
I definitely check the spelling better.
No, but
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 yeah,
that's the
I
thing.
mean, to a degree, it depends on the person too, though. Because like, if it's like somebody like you or Tom, I'm not as much because I know you guys, like I know how you guys think, so I'm just sort of feeding you guys the food you need to make the art.
And we're always talking, so we're communicating, hey Chris, what did you have in mind for this and that? So,
Yeah,
I going through all the process stages of creating a comic and involved, if you're a self-publisher and doing your own thing, it's a completely different process than working for a company.
yeah. I mean, I've done company work, and it's definitely different,
It is,
and
yeah.
it's both good and bad. I mean, it's kind of nice that you just sort of go, here you go, and it's gone. You never see it again. You
So
know,
anything else we want to mention on this? Anyone we forgot?
I don't think so. For comic books, no. I mean, I think we'll never get over the cartoonists. What is a cartoon? We could probably do a whole
We
episode about just what is a cartoon.
we need to get other people on here and just surprise them with that terminology and see what everyone says.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, the other one that you can always go for, I think it's a little cliche nowadays, but you just say you're a visual storyteller. I feel like I should only say that if I'm just drinking champagne and eating hors
Yes,
d'oeuvres
but
with somebody.
so you go for the whole process, and at the end they'll say, "Oh, you draw comic books." That's what's going to end up with the last word.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
going to look like more of a fool by saying that.
Well, it's funny because then they'll say, "Oh, you draw comic books." Then my next line is, "Want to buy one?"
Yeah. Okay, that's a great way to end this episode. So,
Okay.
thank you for joining us today. Any last words?
I mean, you got to figure out where you fit in there and give yourself the appropriate name.